Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB Pro and CEO of MTS Nutrition. Today's guest is Marc Lobliner. Marc, welcome to the podcast.
What's up, everybody? Man, what a beautiful, ugly ass day. It's fucking icy out here in Nashville, man. I almost broke my ass on the driveway this morning. Almost did, but luckily I still have some athletic ability. I was able to make it out alive. Barely. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing awesome, Marc. Like I said before we turn on the mic, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm looking forward to kind of digging into your story a little bit and talking about what you're up to today. So I start each podcast, Marc, off by asking all of my guests the same two questions. So the first question that I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
See, I'm biased because I'm friends with a lot of my favorite bodybuilders. It's kind of weird how, throughout the industry, when I was a kid, it's obviously, well, for me, obviously, I remember I was trying to get big for football. And so I went to the newsstand. I went to 7-Eleven on La Cienega and La Tierra, La Cienega and Centinela in Culver City, California, right on the Inglewood border. And I remember I saw these magazines. At that time, there was Muscle Mag, and they had Amy Fodley on the cover, who was gorgeous. And I'm like, that's cool, but I got Penthouse. Then I had Penthouse. Everybody had Penthouse. We used to have porn in magazine form when I was a kid. That's how old I am. And then they had Muscle and Fitness, which had just some pretty looking guy. I think it was O'Hearn, actually. He's immortal. I don't know if it was O'Hearn. But anyway, so I'm like, that's all right. Then on the cover of Flex was Dorian Yates. And all I remember was his hamstrings. It was that iconic side shot, had the graininess in his hamstrings. And that's what I wanted to look like. I knew I wouldn't look like that at the time. Obviously, I've achieved at least some of Dorian's graininess and look, but I was 13 years old. And I was like, that's how I'm going to make gains. I'm going to look like that guy. So obviously Dorian Yates has always been a favorite of mine. Now he's a friend of mine. Phil Heath, good friend of mine as well. Brandon Curry's my business partner. You always got to give a shout out to Ronnie Coleman, who's also a friend of mine. And, all these guys, there's so many, I don't want to leave anybody out. Kai Green, they all have their unique stories and their unique. See, I'm not as interested in the physique anymore. I'm more interested in the mindset it took them to become great. Because I'm a coach. I coach high school strength. I coach the wrestling team. So if I can learn the mindset from these great athletes, I can pass it on to another sport or some of the athletes that I train, and that can make them better people. So for me, looking at a Phil Heath, who's a D1 basketball player, looking at a Kai Green who climbed his way out of the slums, looking at a Dorian Yates, a blue collar work ethic without the greatest genetics, a Ronnie Coleman who outworked everyone alongside the, having great genetics. I mean, these guys are all wonderful, wonderful human beings, and and I know them all personally. And that's the thing, you have a lot of gossip channels just going on and dragging the dirt in the industry. Man, these guys are my friends, like Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler is one of the nicest, most charitable guys you will ever meet. And he's getting dragged right now. Jay Cutler took time and money out of his own life to come to a charity event I put on last year without even asking a question. He's just like, cool, it helps kids with cancer. I'm there. So I think we need to focus on, these are not only great athletes, but a lot of these guys are really great individuals. You just need to get to know them.
Excellent. So tell us, Marc, at what age did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
13 years old. Let's say I didn't come from money. And I lived in California, Los Angeles. I went to Culver City High School. And at that time, there was affirmative action. I'm not making a political statement, but this is my mindset at the time. Whether it's right or wrong, or I agree or disagree with myself now, is irrelevant. At the end of the day, here's what happened. You weren't getting into a UC if you were white or Asian. It is what it is. So I knew that to get into college, I was like a 3.0, 3.2 GPA, whatever, average. So what I did is I knew that I had to find a sport. I need to get a scholarship. So I chose football, and I walked in the weight room, and that's where I was like, all right. So I was kind of half-assing it. And one day my coach, his name was Coach Carroll, stood up. He's like, Lobliner, you ain't going to play a lick if you don't lift. And I'm like, oh shit, he's right. So the next day I approached two guys. One was Coach Miles, who was our linebacker coach, strapping, tall, 6'4", 300 something pound black guy. And then I had Leon Hatton, who was our outside linebacker coach. Outside linebacker. He was a upperclassman. So he was going into his junior year. He was going into his senior year. I was going to my junior year. So I'm like, guys, I want to train with you. And they laughed at me. And I was like, why are you laughing? You know, they're like, you can't hang with us. So I hung with them on chest day. Because we train like bodybuilders. Strength training has come a long way since 1996. And long story short, I started training with them. Over the course of the summer, I gained 70 pounds. I went from 170 to 240, and I got drug tested, and I passed because I didn't know what steroids were at the time, or else I'd have taken the shit out of them. And here we are. So I started lifting to play football and to get out of my situation, which wasn't the best at the time.
Excellent. So I want to transition into your backstory a little bit more, because I'm a lot like you, Marc. I love bodybuilding. I compete in bodybuilding, but I'm really more interested kind of in the backstory than in terms of than, you know, how they necessarily got the muscle. So I know from your website, I did a little research, did a little reading, because I like to try to be prepared. I know maybe you grew up not in the best of situations. So yeah. Would you maybe just touch on that? Talk about your childhood. Your mom was a drug addict. It said on your website, Your dad was an overeater. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll stop about high school, and then we'll transition from there.
You know, just for the record, my mom is still alive, and we're actually talking again. That just happened 2 weeks ago. So it's a huge step in our healing. You know, I come from a very loving family that just had bad things happen. You know, my mom went through some bad times. She grew up poor, first generation American, served in the Israeli Defense Force. My mom's a great person. Unfortunately, you know, she had some bad breaks and got addicted to painkillers, which, you know, doctors overprescribe things, and it led to what it led to. And my father literally killed himself through food, through type 2 diabetes. So, you know, without besmirching the name of my parents, my father was the greatest man. But my mom spent a lot of time in rehab and mental institutions, and I was in and out of those. You know, I spent a lot of days visiting my mom at mental institutions. That led to me literally raising myself a lot of my childhood, from the age of, what was it, like probably 10 on, is that I raised myself. And I was forced into a situation where I had to become an adult real quick. And I had to figure things out. And I got involved in some stuff, man. I did some bad things, and, you know, I hung out with the wrong people. But, you know, that kind of led me to where I am today. You know, the first 10 years of my life were amazing, you know, Little League. And we didn't have like, you know, Donald Trump or Mitt Romney money. You know, we didn't have that George Soros money, but we did okay. And, you know, my father had a good government job, and everything was kind of cool. And then imagine, like, you're going through life as like just a normal kid. And then around like 10 years old, like your world collapses and you lose everything essentially. So I was forced to have this fight or flight. Now, a lot of kids in my situation, they end up down the wrong path, and I almost did. But fortunately for me, I had the right people get involved with me at the right time. And that's, I hate to segue, and I'm a bit ADHD, and I apologize for that. In that, you know, there was coaches. That's the reason I coach today, because it's literally my calling on earth to coach kids. Because if it wasn't for coaches, Coach Scott McCrilla, Coach Miles, I would be dead right now, guarantee you, because a lot of people that I hung out with, they're not with us anymore. So at the end of the day, you know, I was very fortunate to have good people step in and save me.
So, talk a little bit about maybe some of the mental side of things for yourself when at 10 years old, as you said, your world kind of, you know, came apart. Were there some mental struggles? And if so, what were they? And how did you kind of work through them as a younger person, or did that not happen till adulthood?
I was suicidal. I mean, I was depressed. I was fat, you know. When I lived, before we moved to the high desert to get my mom away from the drugs. And after that, we moved to the inner city, not the inner city. We moved towards Culver City, Inglewood area. Right. So, you know, I used to get made fun of a lot, believe it or not, in Simi Valley, California, because I was Jewish. It was really fucking weird because people say, you don't know what it's like to deal with racism. Well, maybe not racism, but anti-Semitism is pretty easy. I was fat and I was Jewish. And well, how do they know you were Jewish? Well, my mom wore a star around her neck. And like I don't want to sound, can I sound racist talking about Jews? I think I got the Jew card, but Jews look different. We just fucking do. My mom looks really fucking Jewish. It is what it is. So kids used to make fun of me and I just thought I was worthless. And I remember just having, depression. And the only thing that got me through that was I was good at sports. I was a good baseball player. I was a great baseball player. I was the starting center on my 8th grade basketball team. Unfortunately, I'm the same height I was in 8th grade now, but the ability to go out, and that was the only time, like I'd go to school, I'd get made fun of, get picked on, and I just wanted to die. What's the point of living? It's not going to get better. Like everybody keeps telling you your best years are your youth years. And I'm like, this sucks, but when I played sports for that brief moment, I was the guy. Like I was the man. I was the one hitting the home runs. I was the one making the tackles. I was the one, even when I played soccer, I was the best keeper in the damn league. And if I didn't have athletic ability, and I was so lonely, so bored, before I ended up, in my teenage years running with the wrong crowd, all I did was train. If I wasn't shooting hoops, I was throwing the ball against the fence in my backyard, getting better at pitching. We didn't have internet. So I'd go and just watch people play. I'd go pick up basketball and see how they do crossovers. And I mean, if it wasn't for sports, and that's why I'm so involved. Like everybody says, how many kids do you have? I usually say 75 because every kid I coach, they're my kids. Like I had one of my athletes yesterday. I was in tears. One of my athletes, he's actually competing in state for wrestling. His name is Sachin. He's an amazing athlete. He texts me like, hey man, congratulations on GNC. We're so blessed to have you as a coach. I'm like, oh my God, like, this is amazing. That right there, dude, that was better than getting a pro card. Like that was it. And that's, again, coaching is my calling, but getting back to it, dude, I understand what it's like to be down. I understand what I didn't come from money. Like people are like, oh, you don't know what it's like to, I'm like, what, just because I live in Brentwood doesn't mean that I've always been in Brentwood, Tennessee. It's a very kind of floofy area. That's why I don't get along with anybody here. Yeah.
All right. So I want you to expound a little bit more, if you don't mind, Marc, on some of these coaches that you said they were the right people. And it seems like they had such a impactful, part in your childhood that, you just said coaching is my calling. So talk a little bit more. How did these coaches speak into your life when you were a child? And how did that really impact you to the point that you're like, again, coaching is my calling now as an adult?
You got a kid who's going through issues and you go to the weight room and Coach Miles would train with us. We literally were 3 people training. Going into my junior year, it was me, Leon, and Coach Miles. And, it was more of a just believing that if you work hard enough, and he would say that Coach Miles, like he's a reverend. I don't even know if he's still alive right now, but I saw him a few years ago. And I remember he's like, look, Lobliner, he used to call me Lob. Football, they abbreviate your last name. Lob, you're terrible now, or you suck now. And he's like, but you keep training, you'll be good. I'm like, okay. And I kept getting bigger and stronger. And Leon and I we'd have weight training from 1:30 to 2:30 after school. And then we train another 2.5, 3 hours. And then we do conditioning with the basketball team. And I'm a 200, at that time I started at 170, but I'm gaining like 10 pounds a week. It's crazy. And I'm natural. And everybody was like, I was that kid on steroids in school, and for me, it was just being there. It was having a strong male. Everybody needs, and my dad was a great dad, but he wasn't a strong male. He worked, he brought home the bills. But my dad, if he got pushed, he'd just back off. Coach Miles punch in the mouth. I needed that strong male. And Leon was just a kid who's trying to make it, go D1. And he took me in as a friend, we're from different, and this is why my worldview is where it's at. Like, in case you want backstory and visual, like Coach Miles and Leon, they weren't white. Like, I was taken in, and my entire childhood was formed by just hardworking Americans. And it taught me that if I work hard enough, I can do anything. That's when my grades got better. I stopped getting in as much trouble. And, Coach Scott McCrillo was another guy. And he just, when it was time to get recruited, he sat there, he put together film for me, and he talked to the D1 coaches. And, he took me under his wing. He'd come to the gym with me. We'd go train at Gold's Venice. It was just these adults, they didn't have to do anything. Like, I was just an undersized 5'7", white kid who had decent athletic ability, but I wasn't Brian Urlacher, dude. But they took the time and they were like, if you put the work in, we will give you the work back. They didn't even have to say it. All I know is every day when I showed up at the gym, Coach Miles was waiting for me. And I can't say enough, but Coach Miles he was literally a security guard at the school. This isn't a guy who, like if you ever read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the rich dad who took him in and mentored them. My mentor just mentored me with actions. Just a strong male that I needed in my life.
Beautiful. So before we get kind of into the fitness side of things, I want to talk about you now as a coach. At what point did you realize like that coaching was your calling? And then at what point in your adulthood did you start getting into coaching, Marc?
So throughout my career as owning businesses, I always took time to continue education. And I didn't want to get another marketing degree. Like, what the hell am I going to do with that? Right. So I kept getting Exos and even CrossFit. I kept getting these certifications and going to mentorships, learning movement patterns, injury prevention, getting certified in different things. And I'm like, well, this is great. And then I noticed that as my kids start winning, I'm like, this is better than me winning. This is amazing. So I was asked to pretty much become a coach at a soccer club in Illinois because they had a huge issue with ACL tears for girls. And a lot of they had 11 ACL tears, non-contact, the year before I came in. So the coach, the director, is still a good friend of mine. His name's Scotty Keena. He actually lives in Tennessee now. He goes, hey, Marc, can you take over, start a strength program for us? I'm like, yeah, no problem. So I put it together. We got the equipment and everything. In one off season, 6 months, went from 11 ACL tears to 0 the next season. And our teams were starting to perform better and win. And I'm out there, and usually I'm the guy who will just watch his kids and be like, those aren't my kids, fuck them, But I'm like, I'm noticing that emotionally I'm attached to each of these kids. And I'm like, wait a second, like, this is amazing. And I'm seeing these kids and they're thanking me and their parents are thanking me and they're not injured. Like we had a girl tear her ACL on my daughter's soccer team, and I'm pissed off because I know I could have prevented it, but I can't coach everybody. Right. So for me, it's like, I don't want kids to get injured. And look, at the end of the day, it's different. Like where I grew up, it was more like we had to make it out. Like we had fight or flight. I live in Brentwood, Tennessee, man. I'm being honest. Like the houses in my community, they start at 2-point-something million, bro. These kids are not, everybody going to that high school, they're doing okay, but in a different way. These kids don't have to fight. So what happens when they get out from under mommy and daddy's house and they have to fend for themselves? They don't have that fight or flight work ethic. So we're in there, and these are some of the hardest working kids. But, honestly, for me, it's about the next generation. These are our leaders. And I'm not saying I go in there. I'm not talking about anything, no politics, no nothing like that. I'm not on the school board, dude. All I talk about is winning. And as long as the program wants to win, I'm there. I donate my time. I don't get paid. I told them to take the money they would pay me and put it into equipment. So for me, look, man, I think I was put on this earth and made good at my career, making delicious protein bars, right? I was actually going to eat this. I didn't have time. I was put here. That's how I pay my bills. But the reason I'm able to pay my bills with that is so I can go out and do this and help and be a part of my kids' lives. And also all these other kids who, and they have good dads. They're good dads involved. But like the more strong men you have in your life, the better. And I know that might sound chauvinistic, but statistics back me up. households with dads do really well compared to households without dads. It is what it is.
It's truth, right?
Don't want to hurt feelings, but look, there's biological differences. Like my dog will not listen to my wife. He listens to me. It's biology. It just is what it is. And whether you're a female athlete or a male athlete, having a male who can set an example. And I'm not saying to curse like me. I'm saying just for hard work, reaping what you sow. I think that's the future. That's why we need to work hard.
Excellent. So let's get back into your story a little bit in terms of when you're younger. After you graduated high school, where did life take you, Marc?
Well, what really saved me was at 16, I met my wife. She was the captain of the cheerleading team. I was the captain of the football team. And literally the weekend before, she asked me out on AOL Instant Messenger. She's like, are you Marc, that big guy from the football team? I'm like, well, yeah, and so she asked me out. And but I was actually getting back into a lifestyle that I shouldn't have, just hanging out with the wrong people, gang fights, all that shit. And I met my wife, and that's when I was done. Like, I fell in love. Like, we were literally in love. So after high school, my wife and I, I hurt my knee, so I wasn't able to go D1, which was a blessing. I ended up going to a school in Thousand Oaks called California Lutheran University. Hurt my knee again, never saw it down on the field. But nonetheless, got my degree. We ended up I was working at a gym, Bally Total Fitness, as a personal training coordinator. I actually worked out of a few of their gyms, and I'd help their training programs as a coordinator. And I also trained clients. And after I was actually recruited by Weider Publications from my gym. One of my clients knew the executive VP at Weider. Here I am, 19 years old, interviewing at Weider. And somehow, I interviewed versus guys with master's degrees and years of experience in advertising sales. And somehow I was able to get that job. And the rest is history. Joe Weider was actually technically my first boss, the guy who literally invented the industry. The path I've been on has been full of adversity. Nothing was ever given to me. But along the way, there's been some things that have happened. And I think it was, I worked hard enough and put myself in the positions to have these really amazing situations, happen. And I mean, Weider was the launching ground, and I worked with so many smart people. I learned so much, and I'll always be indebted for that opportunity.
What did you do once you got hired by Joe Weider? What did you do within the company?
So I started in advertising sales. So they gave me, I think I started in California at $24,000 salary, which in California is the equivalent of making well below minimum wage. I think that, what is $22 an hour is like 40 grand or something. So I was well below like any kind of living wage in California. I don't think you can live for less than 250 right now in Cali. So I'm like, all right, let's go. So I quit training, went all in, and they made a mistake of giving me a commission structure. So they gave me a $30,000 territory. And within, I think 6 months, I had it up to about 3 million. So my first commission check, I remember my wife called me. She goes, I think they messed up on your check. And here's a guy making, $2,000 a month salary. And she goes, well, like, what do you mean? She's like, there's like extra zeros here. It was literally a 6-figure check. And I'm like, huh. So I went to my boss. I'm like, you messed up on my check. He's like, no, we didn't. He's like, you earned that. I'm like, you're kidding me. So I literally paid off all my school loans, paid off all my wife's school loans, and we got right. And that was right. I think I turned 20 at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And my wife was actually still going through some school, and she graduated early as well. So, I mean, that was holy shit. And then from there, I moved on and did some more marketing. Actually, I was in a couple magazines as a model. Before I aged and got ugly. I was in men's fitness, and I've been in muscle and fitness and flex and all that. So I was able to really integrate within the company, wrote a few articles. Most people, if they do ad sales, they do ad sales. If they do this, they do that. But I was so hungry, and I made sure And again, I credit Coach Miles and Coach McCrillo with this. And my dad was a really hard worker. Um, I was always, I would find out when the first person got in the office, and I'd get there 10 minutes before that. And then I'd find out when the last person left, and I'd leave 10 minutes after that. The problem is my boss, Laya Clark, who's still in the industry. This motherfucker would roll in at like 11 a.m. and leave at like 10. So I'm literally just sitting there, just like till 10 p.m., like from like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. because I needed them to know that I was willing to get dirty. And I just found stuff to do. So if you're at work for 15, 20 hours a day, you're literally going to be able to get involved in a lot of people's shit and network. And I was able to get like, man, I was just telling a story the other day about, I remember like Phil Heath's first time we saw Phil Heath. I was there. The first time the magazine saw Phil Heath, I was there. They're like, hey, did you see this kid? He's called The Gift. And I'm like, he's the what? And there's fucking Phil. And now Phil's one of my good friends. It's just weird how the world works. But, you know, I'm not special. You know, it's like, I don't have any real great skill other than just not wanting to lose. I mean, I'm average at best. My physique is average at best. I just did the most I could with it, you know, and same with my brain. Like everything I've done is because I don't give up. And so people are like, oh man, you have an ego. I'm like, no, trust me. The one guy who doesn't have an ego is me. I'm surprised I've done this much. So, you know, it's just, again, like, and the only reason I have that attitude is because I had the right people in my life.
Talk to me a little bit, or expound a little bit more on sales, because life is sales, and
Yes.
it's very important. And I think it's something, even for myself, I have a lot of room to improve in that, in terms of, you know, selling within the gym and things like that. I think a lot of us within the fitness industry, quote unquote, don't like sales, but we don't realize that, again, life is all about sales. So talk a little bit more about maybe some of the things that you learned from sales, and some of the insights that you can share with us so that we can glean from you, Marc, please.
We're all in sales, dude. Every single one of us. Like gym, you got the best gym in the world. Unless you could churn a membership and sell day passes, you're going out of business. Sales is life. So you can have the cure for cancer, but if you can't market and sell it, it doesn't exist. So from sales is basically, a lot of it's psychology, right? A lot of marketing is basically the psychology of getting people to buy your shit, you know? And I remember when I first started at Weider, the marketing department was so like, oh, we're not in sales. They got these bitches from New York, you know? And I'm like, motherfucker, you're literally sales support. Like you should be wanting to go on sales calls with us, so you know what you can do to offer up what we're selling. You're basically, what marketing is it's ammunition for the sales team. So for sales, you know, I think building a better mousetrap is obviously number one. You have a superior product, that's great. But if you look at, like, for example, the intra workout category, like Extend, that was me. We didn't invent branch chains. We just popularized a better time to take it, which is intra workout. So when people say I created the intra workout category, you can say yes and no. Did I invent branch chains? No. Did I make them taste better? And did I market them as an intra workout, which ended up being backed by studies later on? Yes. So I think that when you're coming out with a product, you need to understand that unless you can get messaging with differentiation and positioning, it's pointless. And I think there's a good book. It's called Ready, Fire, Aim, if you haven't read it. And this guy, his position is that your CEO should be he should be your sales manager. Your number one sales guy is your CEO. Next week, I leave on Sunday and I'm visiting 18 Hy-Vee stores in 3 days, driving over 2,000 miles, going door to door. Now I'm a hybrid. There's very few. I handle every single sale for every one of our companies, tens of millions of dollars in brands. And I handle every single sale, from mom and pop retailers to GNC, to Big Lots, to Target. So who else is going to tell your story? So I have people all the time, hey man, you're looking for sales reps. I'm like, I don't want to sound like a dick, but we kind of streamlined that to just me. So it's sales. I think sales get a bad rap but it's the most populated profession in the world. It's the most populated by far. And let's say, oh, I don't need to sell. I'm in academia. I'm a researcher. Good luck trying to get a grant for your study if you don't know how to fucking sell your project. It's all about sales. Sales is life. And one way to get good at sales, the best entry-level job you could get, become a server at a restaurant. Because you're dealing with adversity, because everybody's mad their food's fucking cold. And you're interacting with people. Learn how to deal with people. I have a confession to make, man. I hate hugging people. I don't like being close to people. If you ever talk to me in person, I'm like, I already have the 6 foot rule, man. But I made it a mission of mine where at trade shows, I'm literally that guy who hugs you, because it's not for sales. I just think it's a good way to be a human, which is why obviously I'm in Tennessee. We don't do the whole like thing that's been going on lately. I don't want to get your channel banned, but for me, what a better way to start a relationship or a conversation than a handshake into a hug, or even just a handshake. I think that the Zoom, and I know we're doing Zoom right now and it's convenient, but the Zoom generation and this whole like Zoom world, it's going to kill us. Like, humans need interaction. We need it. And for sales, like, again, it's about earning the trust, but an initial sale means nothing. You have to keep that trust. So you have to actually be honest about it.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit about your bodybuilding career, or kind of how you stepped into competing. Talk about your first show, and then talk about that grind up to the point when last year you earned your IFBB Pro card, Marc.
Yeah. I started competing for basically to grow Sivation. At that time we had message boards and we couldn't get anybody to take our products. Like, it was hard. We didn't have the budget. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do a blog. That's how long ago this is. This is 2004, 2005. And I'm going to just, get ready for a show. So I ended up doing the Carolina Clash, and I won my class. Little known fact, I was the only one in my class, but I still won. Got a little trophy. And I noticed that our sales increased, and it was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So I kept blogging, and then I got better, and I did the Mountaineer, and I did the Gold's Classic, and I'm doing shows. I'm doing a bunch of shows. And I actually ended up being pretty good at bodybuilding. And I'm like, well, damn. So in 2013, I actually was getting ready for nationals, and I did my I actually just won the Max Muscle Virginia, and a really good show, really tough show. Like, these guys looked amazing. And I was like, how the hell did I win that show? And so I went in and I did this NABA show, and I won a pro card. And then I'm like, cool, I'll get ready for nationals. Then I found out that you had to give up your pro card to do nationals, because the NPC ain't having that. And I'm like, dude, I've only had this thing like 6 weeks. So I kept my pro card, didn't do nationals. And basically after that, just long story short, like, I wasn't able to balance competing in life. Like, competing's hard. Like, you feel like shit, your career is going to suffer. Your relationships are going to suffer. And mine don't now, because I'm 41 and I have more life perspective and I'm able to control my emotions more. But when I was in my 30s, dude, I couldn't handle it. It was destroying everything. So I decided to just focus on business and, being a husband and fixing that, relationship that I kind of fucked up for a little bit. And here we are. So bodybuilding wasn't the cause of marital problems. That was me being an idiot. But, at the end of the day, before anybody gets into competing, they have to understand that you need to be able to control yourself. Because I'm not saying I was violent. I didn't have roid rage. I was fucking, it's not me. Like, you almost have to fake it, like fake like you're happy. Because I look back and I thought I was okay at the time. But like, even this last prep, dude, I felt like shit the last couple of weeks. It was tough. It was a grind.
So will
Yeah.
you expound a little bit more then on when you earned your IFBB Pro card for us?
Man, I decided to come back. So my wife, I actually went into boxing for five years after stopping bodybuilding. And I started out really bad, but I actually got pretty good. Like the thing about me and everything in life, I always start out pretty bad and I end up okay because I work hard enough to overcome my genetic deficiencies. And so I was getting ready for a boxing tournament in August and August 27th in Atlanta. And, like as a heavyweight, you're getting hit by heavyweights. It hurts. So like one night, my wife just turns off TV and it's in late July. And she's like, you got to stop boxing. I'm like, well, why? She goes, because you keep getting your ass kicked. I'm like, yeah, point. And I had no like reaction other than, yeah, you're right. So I ended up, I'm like, what can I do? Like, you ready to stop bodybuilding? Like, what do I, she's like, we'll talk about it, whatever. So I'm in California. I own a company called Ambrosia and it's located in California. And I'm literally at Iron Addicts Gym with Mike and Sean and CT. And I'm like, I get a text from my buddy Bino who puts on the Knox Classic. He's like, dude, it's like, are you going to be there with the bars? I'm like, yeah, man, get a table ready. We'll sponsor it. Absolutely. He's joking around. He goes, yeah, you should just do the show. I'm like, let me ask my wife. So I asked my wife, I'm like, can I do the Knox Classic? She goes, okay, just okay. Nothing else. I'm like, the fuck? I'm like, I'm going to just, so I screenshot it, sent it to Bino. I'm like, what do you think? He's like, well, she said, okay. I'm like, well, fuck it. So I ended up, had about 10 days to get ready for that show. And I won the Knox Classic. And I actually had to drop down to light heavyweight because I wasn't even training with weights really. I was getting ready for boxing. I was training weights like 2 days a week, but I was lean, but I wasn't very, like my muscle wasn't like, put in perspective, my stage weight at Masters USA was 20 pounds more than my stage weight at the Knox Classic. And it wasn't some crazy steroid cycle. It's that I actually trained. Like my arms and shoulders, I hadn't trained arms and shoulders directly in years. So they filled out and everything just came together. And I got Jose Raymond to help me with coaching and everything just came in. And so I started with that, did North Americans about 4 weeks after the Knox Classic. I came in third place. I believe it was really close, like 2 points off, like first, second, and third were right next to each other. Then I was going to take a year off and come back. And then I'm like, we're just growing. And I'm like, Jose, man, I think I'm ready now. He goes, fuck it, let's go. So we gave it another 7 weeks and we did Masters USA and came home with the pro card, which was a shock to me because again, like this guy, Paul, the heavyweight, the super heavyweight there was just I saw him walking on stage when I knew I won the heavyweight class and I saw this guy walking on stage while I'm walking off. And I'm like, what the fuck is that thing? Like, so just conditioned and grainy and muscular. And I'm like, Jesus, man, I got to get second today, and I didn't even know it was like you had to win your entire age group. I thought it was just class. So I'm like, oh, I just have to win heavyweights. And they're like, oh, no, you have to win the whole thing. I'm like, damn it. I should have probably looked into that. But, I brought a very good package. And I never thought I'd look that good. Like everybody's like, I was talking to my buddy at the gym. His name is Felix. He's gonna win his pro card next year. He looks amazing. And his name is Felix Norman. He's look him up, dude. Felix Norman 5, I think, on Instagram. What a beast. And he's like, you ever look back at pictures and you're like, I'm like, nope. I'll look back at Masters USA and I'm like, nah, never thought I'd look that good. I'm like, I overshot that one.
So, obviously you've accomplished a lot up to this point in your life. Did winning that IFBB Pro card, obviously it meant something to you, but did you kind of just shrug your shoulders and move on? Or was it a little bit more for you than that?
Dude, it was the most exhilarating personal experience of my life. When I say personal, I'm like, aside from like my kids being born and my daughter, is clinching the regional championships or the district championship, or my son doing a great move in wrestling. It's like, I can't explain. Like even last night, I was laying in bed with my wife and I'm like, can you believe I'm a fucking IFBB pro? Like, and it's different. Like it's almost like having a doctor in front of your name, like the amount of respect you get from fellow IFBB pros. And it's just, you can't even explain how much that means to me. And the fact that I think the Manions and Weinberger have done such a great job in making bodybuilding I'm not going to say there's no such thing as a 100% fair subjective sport. Like even basketball, there was a game fixing issue, right? And you literally have to put a ball in a net and they're still cheating. I'll tell you what, of all the sports that are judged, boxing, MMA, all those sports, bodybuilding is probably the most fair. They've done a great job cleaning up the sport. And that's why when people cry politics, the only one crying politics are the ones who lose. Nobody who gets first place is like, yep, that was all political. No, these judges, they don't fucking care. They just they're just looking at body parts. They don't care who you are. They're looking at your flow. They're looking at your body part. And they're putting down numbers. They don't give a shit. They just don't. And maybe they used to. I mean, there was some issues back in the day. There were some bad promoters, but you've had bad employees in your gym, right? You fixed it. But for a while, people probably blame that shit on you. And I was guilty. You know, I always was like, man, those manions. But turns out they're like, JM's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Like, these are good people. So I'm just excited to be in an organization that's going so well.
Are you having any plans to compete then on an IFBB Pro Stage? And then if so, when?
July 22nd, Chicago Pro. My last place I lived before I moved to the great state of Tennessee, which I will never, ever move from because it's amazing. Love this place. I lived in Illinois and I was born in Chicago. I only lived there for 6 months. And I've been to the Chicago Pro. I've been to the Junior Nationals when it was hosted there. And to be on stage and be in my birth city, even if they move it to Atlanta, which I think they might, if Chicago, well, it's in a suburb. So I don't know how the mandates, I don't know. Let's just say that I'm not qualifying for any of those. The only mandate I'd have is if I go out and get lunch with a dude. But I don't want to shit on anybody or make anybody feel or diss anybody, but this is my thought. And I don't want to sound like a prick, but I do that a lot because I say a lot of prickish things. If you played in the Arena Football League, would you consider yourself a pro football player? Nah, you're an arena football player. So they do have a Masters division in the IFBB, and they have these shows, but nobody even knows they exist. And the reason there's a big thing, like, why don't Masters pros get any, people who turn pros Masters get any respect? And I'm like, because we haven't earned it. Because a lot of people get their pro card as a Masters and they just retire. That was their end game. Look, man, I'm 5'7". You could be up to about 5'8". You could be a good 212. Anything taller, you're going to look like a stick next to those guys. Like, they're all midgets. Like Sean Clarita, I love him to death. But like, I think my undersized 13-year-old is bigger than him. And I'm not even playing. I think he is. Thomas had a growth spurt. But God, what a beast. Like, these guys are so muscularly compact. But if you get Epler winning it last year, like, Epler is built a lot like me. He's taller, meaning he's above 5'6". He's got a good waist. And that's the thing, when you pack that much muscle on that little height, you're not going to have the V taper that I'm going to have. So look, I'm not going to say Babe Ruth it, point to the fence and say, hey, I'm going to win, you know, but I'm fucking training for first place. I expect to win. Like, I'm going in there expecting to win that card or win that. I already got the card, win that trophy. 100%. Because when I train my kids, I don't tell them, hey guys, if you get top 3, that's okay. Top 3 is a bullshit mentality. Why would you go through? I like these guys. My goal is to place top 5. Well, that might be reality, but your goal should be to fuck everybody up. What kind of mindset is that? So I don't know where I stand. I've never stood on a pro stage next to these amazing athletes. I've only been a pro for like 6 weeks, but I'll tell you this. I'm doing everything within my power. Training, diet, and just getting at it to bring something special that, you know, the judges will reward. But I do understand that I'm the new kid on the block who's the oldest guy on stage probably. And, you know, I don't think a pro card matters until you compete as a pro. I don't think they should. I think it should be like a driver's permit, where you kind of have like a provisional pro card, and then you have to actually compete as a pro for it to actually count as being a pro card. That's my opinion.
Perfect. Tell me why you chose, with all the connections within the bodybuilding community that you have, Marc, why did you choose Jose Raymond to help you earn your IFBB Pro card as a coach?
I mean, look at him. Like, Jose had the physique. Like, I win based on conditioning. I don't have the best muscle bellies. My arms are shit. They've gotten better. My calves are shit. But the one thing that will shut people up is when you come in with conditioning. And I wasn't blessed with it. I have a good body. I have a really good physique. I have good lines. I have good taper, but I have weaknesses, and I don't do this for a living. A lot of these guys, they're bodybuilders or they're trainers. I'm a fucking CEO. Like, I have to go travel for 4 days next week. Like, I don't got it like that where I can focus so much on it. Jose, here's the thing about Jose. You'll never hear about him overdosing somebody and they end up sick. A lot of things about Jose, you look at his physique, and I was wrong about this. I thought Jose was like, I'm like, dude, like, what do you have to take to look like Jose? But then you realize he's probably the most sane minimalist there's ever been in the sport. Like, the guy was all work, all suffering, cardio and training and just dieting and whatever it took to get to that level. And he just suffered. And he and I became friends over the years. I was a fan of his, obviously, like his physique. And I didn't bring him up at first. But if you're gonna look at anybody where I'm like, okay, that guy's physique is what I would strive for, is because his physique shows the work. His physique shows the graininess and the striations and just everywhere. And we never took my carbohydrate below 350 grams. My protein was at 360, and fat came from the protein and carb sources, which was like bison and chicken. And I mean, we had a couple of days we went pretty low, like 200 grams of carbs, but we were able to really maximize my metabolism. And I've been moving this whole time. Like, I am so hyperactive. So Jose's main thing was to get me to sit the fuck down, and it didn't work. So he's like, fuck it, we're just going to feed you. And he was there every step of the way. He made me pose for 3 hours the days before the show, like every single thing. And I didn't know, I've never seen shredded inner thighs like I had for that show. And I didn't know I had them till I saw the prejudging shots off camera phones. And I remember I posted it and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here. Like, but I'll tell you what, he's become a close friend, and I've learned so much from the guy. And I know there's a lot of trainers who are really good. Like, obviously he worked with Aceto. So you're going to see a little bit of Aceto's work in what he does, right? If he didn't borrow from Aceto, he's an idiot. Aceto's a genius. Then you look at Chad Nichols, you look at Hani, all amazing coaches, but I'm different. Like, the other day I had my kids out there getting ready for states for wrestling, and they were doing sprints and they were dragging because it was hard. So I took off my hoodie and I ran sprints with them. And I'm not saying this is how it has to be, but what separates Jose is he actually did it. And I can respect, but to get all of my respect, you need to have known what it feels like to feel like shit. I want to see your ass striated, like any of those aforementioned coaches, as good as they are, they've never been in shape. Is there any pictures of Hani or Aceto on stage like Jose was? And I know that might sound really stupid, but that's my mindset, because I'm a coach who literally has taken wrestling classes to figure out how wrestlers feel. I'm a little bit weird like that.
I love it, man. It's leading by example, and that's the most powerful way to lead. Talk to me a little bit more, Marc, about mindset. It's something that you've brought up several times as you're just sharing your story with us. What is the mindset? And I know you've talked about the hard work and things like that, but what is the mindset that you try to lead with in terms of your own life? And what is the mindset that you're trying to instill in the next generation or people's lives that you get to communicate with?
I think it's the harder you work, the luckier you get. A lot of people keep waiting for this magical thing to happen, and they just sit back or they wait for things to be perfect. It's like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, but I need blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, you have an iPhone? Okay, you can go. Like, you could do Zoom on your computer for free. Like, just do it. And a lot of people it's paralysis by analysis. And, I'm actually starting a new vlog, but a new podcast type channel. Right. And the guy I'm working with, his name's Preston. He's fucking amazing. And I'm like, dude, and he's like, I don't know about this. And I'm like, dude, you're a perfectionist. That's great. Cause I'm a hammer. I'm just going to go in and let's go. Ready, fire, aim. I think that for mindset, it's about always striving to win. My wrestlers, and this is where I'm having trouble getting through to the girls, because it's like, there was a really good wrestler from Montgomery Central, and one of our girls was up against her. And I'm like, girl, I'm not going to mention her name. I'm like, girl, you got her. And she's like, yeah. Just not like, not like confident about it. And I'm like, no, if you go in thinking you don't have a chance, you don't have a chance. You got to go in, show zero respect, shake her hand. But once you're wrestling with the girl, you don't respect that she's stronger than you. Wrestling is 99% mindset. Everything's 99% mindset. Whereas you got my daughter, you could put her up against a 7-foot boy who weighs 400 pounds, and she's going to think she's going to win. She might get her ass kicked, but she's going to do better because she expects to win. Whether you expect to win or lose, you're correct. So the thing is, a lot of people just get down on themselves, and I do too. And you're going to look, dude, I thought even after prejudging, I did not win Masters USA, but I went up there and I fought like I was the winner, and I smiled and I presented myself like I was the winner. So we're all going to have self-doubt. The problem is, do you have the strength within you to play it off and show that you're going to try and win? Because everybody has doubt. Like, you think Tom Brady with 2 minutes left down by 20 is like, I'm for sure going to win this. No, Tom Brady's probably like, this is a lot, but you know what? I'm just going to go out there and I think I can do this, So we really need to focus on that self-affirmation from within to be able to go and say, look, I'm good enough to beat these people. I'm good enough to win, and just go for it. Don't hold back. Just give it your all. If you hold back, you're going to regret it. If there was a touchdown that you could have gone 20% harder and crossed the goal line, you're going to regret that the rest of your life. I told the kids the other day at practice, I'm like, look, if you miss this session, if you miss any sessions next week, when you're my age, you're going to look back and you're going to say, if only I would have gone to that session, I could have been a state champion right now. And that's what separates a state champion from a regional champion is this much. It's micro percentages. Who trained harder? Who ran more? Who did that? Who did this? Who did more road work? Who worked on their shots better? And that's life. What separates a millionaire from a guy who's scraping by is usually the little things.
Who's been somebody that's been a huge influence in your life in terms of adulthood? You talked about the coaches when you're younger. Has there been a mentor or somebody that's really impacted you as you've gotten older and as you stepped into adulthood?
There's been so many people I've worked with, my business partners, from Chad Vortameshi over at Tiger Fitness and MTS to Sean at Ambrosia. Mike Rasheed's a good friend of mine, obviously, and, very influential in my life. I have really good business partners. And we have this thing we talk about at Ambrosia that is called leveling up. Like, you surround yourself with people better than you so you could level up. If you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a new room. Every time I'm sitting down, and Sean's a genius. Like, we just got out of a lot of meetings this week, a lot of corporate meetings. And I'm trying to figure out how to emulate his presentation style because it's so good. So the thing is, you want to surround yourself with greatness. And I've surrounded myself with so many good people. But I think, if you look at a lot of things there, like my wife is obviously, she's always stayed true to who she is, and she's never changed. She's down to earth. She still clips coupons, you know. It's like she's always been true to herself and her belief system. And so, you know, by realizing that more, because it's hard to realize that when you live with somebody and you see them every day, and you obviously, when you're with somebody, it's a different dynamic, because you do stupid shit that you would never do to anybody else but those people. So I think that just surrounding myself with a lot of good people, and the Jose's, and the, you know, my training partner, Courtney, just different people with different mindsets. But there's not one person who's like taken me under their wing and shown me the way. But I've surrounded myself with so many people that are so much better than me at so many things that it's allowed me to become a better rounded individual.
Love it. Talk to me about fatherhood, please, Marc.
It's everything. Fatherhood is everything. It's what I'm here for. Once you have children as a man, your job is to develop the next generation. Your job is to foster a mindset of leadership, of morals, of ethics. And that's your number one goal. Everything you do points back to fatherhood. You know, everything you do, from earning money to staying in shape so you can live a longer, more productive life. Everything you do boils down to how it impacts you as a father. And that's where a lot of dudes go wrong. And that's where society's fabric is falling apart, is that men no longer take responsibility for their actions. And when you have a society of weak men, you're going to have a weak society. And we're seeing that right now. I was just watching a school board meeting in Virginia, where it was a woman speaking up about hypocrisy and ill justice within the classroom. It was a woman. Men are dead. Like, we need to bring back the male who speaks up against injustice, who speaks up against, you know, the taking of one's freedom. And I'm not in there saying America, 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 but I'm teaching these kids that, look, man, you have the power from within to take a stand, to be a man. And I would never mix politics and all that bullshit with coaching, with even parenting. But I'll tell you what, you know, my kids have had many instances where they've stood up to bullies on behalf of other people. And that is what we need to raise. But unfortunately, you know, dads are too busy watching other men play sports and betting on them to spend any quality time with their own children. And I see it all the time. There are some really good parents, really good dads. I would say probably 90% of the dads where I live are really freaking good dads, really involved good dads. But here's the problem. I mean, this community is very affluent and very fitness oriented. You ever notice that? Usually people who are fitness oriented have those values. So take that for what it's worth. But I do, you know, I feel so strongly about being a parent. I'm not perfect. You know, my kids mess up all the time, but we fix it. You know, I've been in the damn principal's office for Thomas too many damn times. But you know what? We sit down with the teacher, we hash it out. I had his teacher email me the other day. You know, I'm like, because every week I'll check in. She checked in with me. She's like, Thomas is still doing awesome. Still proud of him. I'm like, yep, that's awesome. And there's a teacher that he was just butting heads with. I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's meet. Let's meet before school. Let's get it done. We sat down with the principal and I'm like, okay, what can I do to help you make my kid not suck? And of course, every kid looks at their teacher like there's some evil old person. And then you meet the teacher and you're like, I'm older than this woman. And she's like the nicest woman. I'm like, she's so sweet. Like, how can I have a problem with her? And then you realize that you look at teachers the same way. So I'm sure some of the kids look at me, Coach Marc, as some evil guy, you know, who just makes them do deadlifts, you know, so.
So we're going to wrap it up here. I know you've got a lot going on, Marc. I want to ask you, for all of us that are listening, all of us that are watching, what's one or two pieces of business advice that you would like to leave with all of us?
Well, business advice would be become an expert in your field. You know, don't go into a business. Like, I get all these questions like, hey, I'm going to start a business, like a supplement company. Like, what should I do? I'm like, well, who's the top distributor in the industry? What's a distributor? Okay. Okay. So what are your certifications you're going for? Huh? What's the insurance policy you got to get? What? So you got to do your homework, become an expert at it, work for someone else and learn from their mistakes. That's what working for Weider allowed me to do. I interacted with a lot of these companies and I was able to see what they did right and what they did wrong. So number one would be, don't just go out and bet on black, learn, become a student, spend 3 to 4 years, maybe working for someone else and getting a mentorship just by proxy, by working for another company. And number two would be, not everybody needs to own a business. My brother is a senior VP for a very large company and does stupid well, very high regarded. My brother never had to worry about not paying himself because he didn't get some accounts receivable as he needed. My brother never had to worry about an insurance policy or a lawsuit or any of that. He just went to work, did his job, and let his bosses worry about that. So the lure of ownership, you never truly work for yourself. I wake up every morning, not because I want to wake up really early, because I have to answer to my customers. Like, you never work for yourself. You work for your customers. You have to pay taxes, right? So I would say you're working for Uncle Sam too. So there's nothing wrong with being an employee. But if you're going to be an employee, treat it like your own business. And if your employee does not give you the same respect back, we're still, last time I checked, a free country. Find a new job. I love the ones like, oh, my employer's mandating I do this. You know what I'm talking about, right? I'm like, why would you work for someone who doesn't care about what you want to do? If I told my employees I want you to inject testosterone and they said no, and I'm like, well, you're fired because you're not jacked, because it's for the greater good. What kind of douchebag move is that, right? Especially if testosterone cannot stop you from getting or giving jackness. That's what I'm like, dude, just quit your job. Well, I've been working for so long. Yeah, but I know a woman who did go out and comply. I'm trying to use language that people understand, but they don't understand. And she got it, and she got terrible adverse events. And then they fired her. Any employer who would mandate you do something like that, that's a scumbag. So don't do something that you don't feel comfortable doing. In my opinion, it's right up there with sexual harassment. It's bodily harassment. I mean, you should always work in a place where you feel valued. You feel like you could talk to your boss. In fact, I don't even want him, if he calls you his boss, he's a douchebag. He should say, that's my colleague, that's whatever. But I think boss I don't even like that word. We work together. We have a common goal. I just happen to be the guy who has to deal with the bullshit. So that's my thing. There's nothing wrong with being an employee, but do not let an employer control your life ever.
All right. So the last question I have for you then, going back to bodybuilding, what do you feel like bodybuilding has given you, or how do you feel like bodybuilding specifically has changed your life?
I'm bodybuilding. Like, I was at First Watch this morning getting breakfast. The guy walked up, hey, are you a bodybuilder? It becomes your identity. You're bigger. You look different. It's your identity. When I go to school, when I coach, kids take me more seriously, like, because the other coaches don't look like me. They're like, well, I'm going to listen to this guy or the guy who's jacked. And from a professional standpoint, my brother, like I was talking about, my brother was a natural pro bodybuilder in the OCB, IFBA. My brother's jacked. He's a big dude. And he's 6'1", very, very, very muscular. And he uses it to help close deals because it's an icebreaker for sales. So he's able to use that, and it commands respect. Like, you come in, you have that confidence of someone who lifts, chest out, posture right. You're going to dominate the conversation. You're going to dominate the meeting. And that's something that you can't get from a textbook. The confidence that being a bodybuilder gives you. So you don't have to be a pro bodybuilder, but I will say this, there is a difference. Being an IFBB pro does change things a little bit. Now, for a lot of people, maybe not. For me, it does. It just does. And maybe it's my own mind because I'm so happy with it. But look, being someone, I'm not saying you have to be jacked, right? Someone who takes care of themselves, someone who has pride in how they look, someone who takes care of their health and everything around them, their insides, their outsides, your quality of life, your work output, everything's going to be better. So again, just speaking as a bodybuilder, not as a competing bodybuilder, it's just a superior way to live.
Very cool. I know that you're, I'm actually in Iowa right now. I know that this next week you're going to be in Iowa,
Yes.
visiting some high V's, I believe Minnesota and Nebraska. Why don't you leave us with a little bit that I'm going to release this on Sunday. So in time for people to, in those states, connect with you later this next week. So talk about that. And then anything else you want to leave us, Marc, in closing, I'll let you share that, and then I'll do the outro.
I just know I have my wife's itinerary right here.
Okay, perfect.
So I'll post it on my social media, but I'm in Des Moines on the 7th. So I'm in one's on Jordan Creek Parkway, one's on 51st West Des Moines. So I got all Des Moines area of Iowa. Waukee is the last one. And then I roll into Nebraska on the 8th. I have 6 stores there in the Omaha area. And then I drive, I believe, 5 hours to Minnesota that night, where I have 5 stores anywhere from Lakeville to Brooklyn Park. And it's going to be a hell of a trip. I'm kind of scared, but you know, it should be a good time.
Are you, so just for anybody that's watching or listening, what are you actually going to be doing on this trip?
So basically I'm just going in there, handing out free outright bars, signing autographs for those who want one, and taking pictures. And just basically I'm doing, to put it down to the most just simple, I'm doing demos at grocery stores. That's it. I'm basically doing the lowest form of it. I'm doing grunt work, and it's going to be fucking awesome. I'm looking forward to the work, and I have to find a way to train in the morning before this starts. That'll be interesting.
Well, like I said, I'm in Iowa, and if you need any recommendations in terms of gyms down in Des Moines,
you got Golds.
In Des Moines, there's a hardcore powerlifting gym, but they have bodybuilding equipment.
Is that 22nd?
22nd Street Barbell. Yep. You got to check it out. Wes Keith is the owner.
I've been there.
Super cool guy. Oh, you have?
Yep. And then there's the Gold. Is Gold still there, or did they go out of business?
Nope. Gold's gym in West Des Moines closed.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good Gold's too.
Yeah. But if you've been at 22nd, man, they've got a new location. They used to be in the Merle Hay Mall down the basement, but they've got a pretty big warehouse building now. And like I said, Wes Keith is a super cool guy. He's been on the podcast, and you'll have to check that out again. So
yeah, I'm staying at the Hampton Inn on West Des Moines Lake Drive. So
okay, well you're going to be a little ways from 22nd, but
I'll find a gym.
You'll find something. Yeah, for sure. So Marc, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your story and some of your insights. Okay.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you having me on.
For sure. All of you are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast. I just want to say thank you really quickly. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And then also please take this episode, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Behind the Muscle, tag Marc, so that we know you listen to this episode specifically. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.